Well, as you say, Hamas has not agreed to it. We'll see if they do. But Donald Trump has made it clear that if Hamas does not accept the plan, or if the plan falls apart, doesn't hold, Israel would have his full backing to finish the job of destroying the threat of Hamas. So you expect that's likely to be the next step?
I do. I don't think, again, that Hamas is even going to accept this deal, Gabrielle. I mean, look, if I'm wrong, then I will obviously own it. But that is not my read of Hamas. Unless they're Qatari sugar daddies in Doha really try to force a hand, which maybe it's possible. But given all the leverage that Qatar seems to have right now over the Trump administration, it's not obvious to me that Qatar is going to kind of go in here and apply on Hamas in turn. Maybe the fact that Israel felt willing to strike Qatari soil with the Hamas operatives a few weeks ago, maybe that does change the calculus for Qatar. Maybe they actually will start to turn the screws on Hamas more than previously done. So if that actually is the case, then we could be looking at a slightly different situation. But absent that, I don't think that Hamas is going to accept the deal. And then even if they do accept the deal, Gabrielle, I mean, what does it mean for a terrorist organization to accept the deal, right? I mean, they might tell Netanyahu, they might tell Trump that they are accepting the deal, and then literally the next day they might be, right back at it. When it comes to firing rockets, doing all sorts of horrible stuff that are in blatant violation of the terms of the deal itself. So I do anticipate that one way or the other, that this is not going to be the end of the road. I would very much like to be proven wrong for what it's worth. I mean, we're coming up here tragically on the 2-year anniversary of October 7, 2023. It's a horrific 2-year anniversary, and no one likes to see this war go on forever. By the way, no one wants to see the war ended more, I think, than the Israeli people, who are the ones literally sacrificing. There have been almost 1,000 dead soldiers, young men predominantly from the military. So everyone wants this war to end. It's just a question as to whether or not it can actually end in a way that is sustainable, and that does not simply return to the October 6, 2023 status quo ante. That remains to be seen.
Can I just get your thoughts on this new committee? Because under this plan, Gaza will be governed by this new committee, which will be made up of qualified Palestinians and international experts, with oversight and supervision by this international body called the Board of Peace. Here's Donald Trump speaking about it.
To ensure the success of this effort, my plan calls for the creation of a new international oversight body, the Board of Peace, we call it, the Board of Peace. Sort of a beautiful name, the Board of Peace, which will be headed, not at my request, believe me, I'm very busy, but we have to make sure this works. The leaders of the Arab world and Israel and everybody involved asked me to do this, so it would be headed by a gentleman known as President Donald J. Trump of the United States. That's what I want, is some extra work to do, but it's so important that I'm willing to do it, and we'll do it right. And we're going to put leaders from other countries on, and leaders that are very distinguished leaders. And we'll have a board, and one of the people that wants to be on the board is the UK former Prime Minister, Tony Blair. Good man, very good man, and some others. And they'll be named over the next few days. And it'll be quite the board.
Josh, what do you make of this Board of Peace?
Well, it's kind of classic Trumpian branding, first of all, isn't it? I mean, the Board of Peace. This is the art of the deal, the Apprentice guy, right? I mean, it's a beautiful. I mean, I think Trump would be the first to say it's a beautiful sounding board name, right? Look, I mean, if all this actually works out, and whether it's 4D chess, 10D chess, 20, I mean, however D's you want to call this high stakes game of international diplomatic chess, if this all actually works out, then Donald Trump will unequivocally, undoubtedly deserve the Nobel Peace Prize. And at that point, if he does not actually get a Nobel Peace Prize, then every single person on the Nobel Peace Prize ought to be not just fired, but probably tarred and feathered in the public square for just being that catastrophically biased towards the president, because he will have achieved really kind of the unthinkable. As far as the actual board itself there, again, the devil is always in the details. We're talking here about Arab leaders. Well, who are the Arab leaders? I mean, are they the non-Islamist, anti-Muslim Brotherhood Arab leaders, the leaders from countries like the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Egypt? Or are we talking here about the Muslim Brotherhood, pro-Islamism Arab countries, namely Qatar, Turkey, perhaps Syria under al-Shara, the former al-Qaeda jihadi who's currently in charge in Damascus? So again, the devil is kind of always in the details here. The Arab world is a much more complicated place than people that people typically realize. There's a reason that's been a particularly violent part of the world for a very long time there. It's not necessarily kind of a unilateral kumbaya style culture. So let's see who's actually in it. But I will say that I like the fact that Donald Trump is going to take onus and actually kind of run this thing himself to an extent, although he doesn't necessarily seem so enthusiastic about that himself.
Let's turn to the US and this horrific shooting at a Michigan church yesterday. It's alleged this gunman rammed his vehicle through the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints chapels and began shooting and setting fire to the building. At least 4 people were killed, 8 were injured. Now, Trump says this appears to be yet another targeted attack on Christians in the United States of America. This epidemic of violence in our country must end immediately. Caroline Levitt also went on television today saying that this was an individual who hated people of the Mormon faith, and they are trying to understand more about this and how premeditated it was. Josh, just horrific and appears to be targeted.
Yeah, it's truly horrific stuff. By the way, Gabrielle, I'm not sure how many Mormons are in Australia. We do have a decent Mormon population here in the United States. I'm Jewish, but I happen to be I love the Mormon people. I have literally never met just kinder, sweeter, more salt of the earth, red, white, and blue, patriotic Americans than Mormons. My law school classmates who are Mormons were just the absolute best human beings. I worked for a Mormon senator, Michael Lee of Utah, actually, after my first year law school. So it's just absolutely awful stuff. And historically speaking, in the United States, Mormons have a somewhat tough history, actually, of oftentimes being persecuted. So the fact that there's still anti-Mormon bigotry here in the 21st century by a truly just deranged lunatic, a former U.S. Marine, actually, if I have my facts correctly there. It's just really sad. And it's a reminder also as well that whether you're Mormon, Catholic, Christian, Jewish, whatever you are, here in the United States, when you go to a house of worship, you should be very, very careful about which house of worship you attend. Is it a house of worship that is a gun-free zone, or is it a house of worship that perhaps encourages armed and trained individuals to carry their own firearms, that has a synagogue or a church security team there? Is there a metal detector? I mean, these are the various things, unfortunately, Gabrielle, that I think we all have to think about here on a day-to-day basis. I certainly know, speaking purely for myself, when I go to synagogue here in the United States, I never show up empty-handed, so to speak. I always have my own protection very much on me, and I would encourage my fellow Americans to very much do the same as well.
Josh, just days after the deadly attack at a Dallas ICE facility, Democrat Seth Melton went on CNN calling the ICE the Gestapo.
How are we going to handle immigration? We all hate what Trump is doing with ICE and these masked people running around like the Gestapo. But what is Democrats' immigration policy? How are we going to take on the challenges of the future?
So, Josh, you have Democrats such as him calling ICE officers Gestapo. You have Gavin Newsom clearly villainising ICE officers. Meanwhile, attacks against ICE officers are up around 1,000%.
Yeah, it's just totally disgusting, just absolutely appalling. I mean, what they're doing here to our good men and women in uniform who are just enforcing this nation's immigration laws. That's literally all DHS and ICE do. They are literally just the agents of the federal government who are in charge of enforcing America's immigration laws. So if you are so trying to otherize, if you're so trying to make immigration enforcement officers out to be Nazi-esque figures, which, by the way, they've been doing this for a while, Gabrielle. I remember when AOC first burst onto the scene back in 2019. Within her first few months, she was comparing the first Trump era immigration facilities to concentration camps, which I mean, don't even get me started on just how appalling and beyond offensive that is. But the rhetoric and the frequency of these analogies is really starting to pick up. And it's really not hard to draw a line, is it? It's really not hard to draw a line between this sort of rhetoric and people just trying to take out a firearm and take shots. Look, Gabrielle, every single poll that we see in the United States, every single poll shows that it is progressives, it is leftists, it is Democrats, really on the far left, who are by far the most prone to violence in this country. The notion that it is the American right, that it is right-wingers who are disproportionately prone to violence is an MSNBC smear. It is a lie. And unless and until the Democrats, really their elected leaders, their elected officials, unless and until they look in the mirror and they have kind of a let's really be honest kind of moment, and they actually call out their own side for what it is and bring them to heel. Unless and until that happens, I genuinely fear for the future of this country, because the moment that America really once and for all ceases to engage in the battle of ideas with the phone and the keyboard and the pen, and instead picks up bullets and swords and rifles and firearms, that is the day that this republic genuinely could possibly die. And I think that at this point, left-wing political violence is the #1 most existential internal threat to the United States' long-term future.
I want to talk to you about what's happening in New York City. Mayor Eric Adams has dropped out of the New York City mayoral race. And of course, this comes after months of back and forth over whether he would bow out, in which it was, I should say, polling fourth, far behind frontrunner Mamdani and former Governor Andrew Cuomo. Now, Polymarket has Zohran Mamdani on an 85% chance of winning. And let's look at his latest pledge. He's promising to spend $100 million more on lawyers to help illegal immigrants facing deportation. So this would be in addition to the $54 million in the city's 2026 budget to fight deportation orders in court with taxpayer money. Now, Donald Trump has had this to say about Mamdani on a Truth Social post. He wrote, self-proclaimed New York City communist Zohran Mamdani, who is running for mayor, will prove to be one of the best things to ever happen to our great Republican Party. He's going to have problems with Washington like no mayor in the history of our once great city. Remember, he needs the money from me as president in order to fulfill all his fake communist promises. He won't be getting any of it. So what's the point of voting for him? This ideology has failed always for thousands of years. It will fail again, and that is guaranteed. President DJT. Josh, I want to get your thoughts on Eric Adams dropping out of the race, what this really means, and of course, Mamdani's latest pledge.
Well, Eric Adams dropping out is something that had to happen in order for there to be any chance whatsoever of Zohran Mamdani not becoming the next mayor of the nation's most important city. Now, something else has to happen too, which is that Curtis Sliwa, the Republican nominee, has to drop out as well. Now, look, if I lived in New York City and if it were election day and Sliwa were still in the race, I would vote for Curtis Sliwa. He is by far the best of the three candidates who are left, Sliwa, Cuomo, and Mamdani. The problem, Gabriella, is just simple mathematics, which is that Curtis Sliwa does not have a path to victory there, and that therefore the selfless thing to do, if you truly care about New York City and you truly want to try to prevent an actual dyed-in-the-wool Marxist communist from becoming the next mayor of the world's #1 commercial and financial center, then unfortunately he's going to have to follow Eric Adams' lead and drop out. And even that, by the way, is very, very far from a guarantee. I mean, even if you have a one-on-one between Andrew Cuomo, the former governor, versus Zohran Mamdani, I'll be honest with you, I still think Zohran Mamdani actually wins that head-to-head matchup. But what I do know is that that's the only chance. That is literally the only chance of Cuomo pulling off that one-on-one matchup and therefore preventing Mamdani. I think Zohran Mamdani is going to win. I mean, you mentioned 85% on Polymarket there. I've seen even higher in some other betting markets. I think he's going to win, and it's a really, really, really scary thought. I actually was just up in New York this past weekend. I grew up in the New York area. Most of my family still lives there, and we were talking with all my uncles and cousins and so forth there. Everyone is terrified of this. I mean, everyone is just utterly horrified that this is what is coming to New York City. And it's not going to be pretty. I do not think it's going to be pretty. I think you're looking at things potentially up to and including like genuine New York icons like the New York Stock Exchange. I mean, is the bull on Wall Street going to start walking southwards towards Miami, near where I live, or towards Dallas, Texas? I think it's entirely possible. I mean, these major banks, these white shoe law firms, it's going to get ugly. Businesses are going to leave. People are going to leave there. It's really, really unfortunate. But if there's any chance for that from happening, I think Curtis Sliwa has to drop out, unfortunately.
I think you're right. But finally, before I let you go, Bad Bunny is set to perform at the Super Bowl halftime show next year, and his real name is Benito Martinez Ocasio, I think if I'm pronouncing that correctly. He is, of course, anti-Donald Trump, anti-ICE, and it certainly raised a lot of questions about what the NFL is doing. Can I get your reaction?
Yeah, the NFL, Gabrielle, has been one of the more woke sports leagues for a while. They still have the George Floyd era "End Racism" sloganeering in the end zones. I just noticed that yet again when I was watching some football this past Sunday. Now, it's interesting on the other hand, though, because the NFL did have something like 28 of the 32 teams had a tribute to my friend Charlie Kirk after he was murdered a few weeks ago. So they were signaling a little bit that maybe they were trying to entertain their conservative bread and butter, rah Americana, red, white, and blue audience there. But I guess that was a fleeting moment, shall we say? They're going back to just their pure, unadulterated woke signaling. Now, look, I'm not exactly I'm not a big Bad Bunny fan myself. I'm more of a country music guy myself, Gabriella. I guess what I will say is that I did enjoy Bad Bunny's cameo appearance in the recent Adam Sandler film Happy Gilmore 2. Bad Bunny was actually Adam Sandler's caddy in that film. That was a pretty unexpected cameo when I decided to play the movie on Netflix, and I thought he actually did a pretty good job in that there. So if it's more lighthearted humor like Happy Gilmore 2 and less anti-ICE, anti-Trump politicking, I think that would go a long way towards trying to shore up his own reputation with broader America, and by extension the NFL's reputation with that same target audience as well.
Senior Editor at Large of Newsweek, Josh Hammer, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Gabrielle.